Welcome back. We've created a very, very basic website. And up until now, if we look at the code, we could build perhaps our own blog platform where we just have pages for our blog posts or our company information. And we got up and running really, really quickly. But as we know, most of the time, apps are a lot more complex than that. They're dynamic. They have API calls that they need to make and get data and change parts of the website based on that data. Kind of like we did with the RoboFriends app. We have to fetch the robots in our component did mount and then finally render it on our page. So in this video, let's see how we can do that, how we can have dynamic apps with Next. Well, Next allows us to do this with an API called getInitialProps. And with that, we can fetch data for a given page, let's say a new page that we're about to build, and it will pass it down to the component as a prop. Again, just simply React. The cool thing about this that we'll see is that we can decide to do the API call on the server before it gets rendered and sent to the client, or we can do this API call on the front end, on the client, where once we give it the page, it will load it separately. So let's get started. The very first thing we need to do is, in order for us to be able to do a fetch call, because that is only available on the browser, and we're not running this in the browser, this is going to be on the server side, we need to have access to fetch. And we can just install a package that's recommended if you're working with Next and server side. It's called, well, let's run npm, not capital, npm install. And it's called isomorphic on fetch. Weird name, I know. All right, so now that we can use fetch on the client side, let's create a new page here. I'm going to say new file is going to be called robots.js. Robots.js is going to have a few things. It's first of all going to use the link from the Next link component. And it's also going to import the fetch that we just downloaded from the isomorphic on fetch package. And we're pretty familiar with the syntax by now. I can just do a const robots equals, not question mark, like this. There you go. And we're going to return here a component. And let's say that this component is going to be a div that has an h1 tag that says robots, and another div that inside of it will have some sort of robots data. For now, we're just gonna type it in, but hopefully we can fetch and render some data in here. And we can close this out like this, and perhaps at the bottom or at the top, we can add a link that references the homepage, so we can go back to the homepage if we wanted to. And this will just be a button that says home. And then finally, close out our link. Whew. And then let's not forget to export default robots. Let's save that and also go back to our main page. And in the main page, make sure that we add another link tag to the robots page. And that's going to be referencing the robots. And actually, for pages, the default is to, or the standard is to keep the files lowercase. So I'm going to change to lowercase robots, just to keep with the standards. All right, so let's change the link over here to our robots page. Again, that's why we have the lowercase r. So it looks nice in a URL. Going to save and making sure that the robots page has the link as well. Let's run the npm start, which runs the next, and see what happens here. All right, we have 2 buttons now, but they both say robots. Let's go back here. If we go to our index.js, let's make that about a boot. I am from Canada after all. All right. We have the about page and the robots page. And we have an error over here. It says syntax error. I really like the errors that they display here. Unexpected token. So let's go back here to our robots. And yeah, instead of curly brackets, we actually need brackets here. Let's save. There you go. Our robots page is working. It's pretty ugly right now, but everything is working at least. If you remember, with our RoboFriends app, we're using something called JSON placeholder. And this JSON placeholder gives us a user's endpoint that we can use over here. You can see the JSON that we get when we do a GET request. Using this URL, let's load up some data here. And the way we do this here is to add get initial props from robots so we can pass these robots down as props. Bear with me here and we'll explain it as we go. I'm going to add a new method called get initial props. And yeah, we're just adding a method to robots. This is another way of doing it instead of perhaps the class method that you've seen before. And in here, we're going to use async await. We could do promises, but let's use async function. And in here, we're going to do our response. Response that is going to say await the fetch, which we have access to now. And it's going to be the URL we just copied, the JSON placeholders. And just to have a little bit of a better view, I'm going to say .then, or we don't need .then because we have the await now. From now, we'll say the const data is going to equal the await response.json. And then finally, we can just return, we can return this data. Let's say that robots is going to be returned with the data. All right. As the name suggests, we have a few errors here. Let's see what we've done. We don't need the semicolon here. Everything is working. As the name suggests, all we're saying is, hey, before we load up this robots thing, let's get some props for it. We're going to do an initial props. We're going to make an API call to this endpoint, get all our data. Remember, this is the data that we're getting, and then load it up as robots. And what we can do now is in the robots, I have props now because, again, the name suggests get initial props. And these props now have the robots property on them. So now, let's say instead of having the robots data here, we're actually going to use, a better syntax. And again, curly brackets, so it's a JavaScript expression, and we'll say that props.robots, we're going to map over these robots. And this is very similar to what we've done in our React app, where we grab the robots and we can, let's say, create an LI that has a key of robot.id. Again, remember, we have ID, name, username, email here that we receive. And you know what? For now, let's just do that and see what happens to make sure that it works. Let's save that, see if we get any error. No. Let's go back to our page and click on robots. Oh, and we just had to refresh a bit. And let's see what we get here. Let's see if we get any errors. Failed to load resources. The rest, oh, okay, that's favicon, that's fine. All right, everything is working. We're just not loading the IDs as we think, although we are loading 10 list items. And if we actually go back, it's because I'm not rendering anything. So let's just say that in here, we're going to load up robots or robot.name. Let's save. Go back. All right, look at that. Our data is loaded. And you can see that this is very similar to what we do in our RoboFriends app. We're just simply using this JSON placeholder to grab our robots and then using another API to grab the robot images. And I'm lacking a bit of CSS styling here, but the idea is all the same. Let's make this a little bit prettier. What if we wanted to have links to each one of these robots, a robot's profile, for example? Well, we can use the link tag again, except this time around we can say link href is going to link to, and I'm using template strings here. There's these quotes right above the tab of your keyboard. And template strings, by the way, are ES6 features, so hopefully you're familiar with them. We're going to say robot, and then I'm going to give it the ID. So let's say robot.id. So we're saying go to the link or URL that is robot, or we should do robots here because that's what we have here for this page. And then within here, we'll leave the robot name the way it is, but close the link tag like so. Let's save and see what happens here. Get an error here because I need to close this component. There you go. And I get an error saying that you're using a string directly inside a link. This usage has been deprecated because we should wrap this in some sort of a tag. So let's just say an A tag for now. Let's save and go back. Look at that. Now I have these links, but check out this URL bar as I click on it. Look at that. I go to robots 1. If I go back, I go to robots 2 page. And obviously we don't have the pages yet because we haven't created those files in the pages folder. But you see here how easily we're able to link to profiles if we want. How cool is that? Again, things work really, really fast and really, really easily in Next. Now, let's do one last thing. I want to console.log the data here. If I save here, now that we have console.log data, let's see what happens on the browser side. If I open up the console again, I see that there's HMR, which stands for Hot Module Reloading. It's just always watching for changes, so we don't have to worry about that. If I click on robots, all right, I'm getting the console log on the front end, nothing on the server on request. But if I refresh this again, do you see that? Nothing happened on the console, but if I go back, you see that on the server, it has been logged as console.log data. What just happened here? You see, that's because when we render the page on the server, we already have the data, and there's no reason to fetch it again on the client. So in that case, refreshing the page never fetched the data on the client, which is very, very cool. All right. I think you're starting to get the idea of Next.js. and how easy it is to do server-side rendering now. You can probably go off on your own and rebuild the entire RoboFriends app using Next and comparing the differences there. I highly recommend you check out this library. As always, they have great documentation, and I hope you explore how you can create even bigger apps than this. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.